So on the University of Surrey Atheist, Humanist and Secularist Society page, an article was shared by Chris Moss, a recently passed PhD student who studied at the London School of Economics. The article was his own, being a discussion on what is termed as faith warriors, particularly those who are beginning to appear within university campuses across the UK. Now, Chris Moss and his fellow humanists from the London School of Economics had faced harassment in the past, not necessarily or so much from students, but rather the director of the London School of Economics, aka Craig Calhoun. This is a man who argues that religion must be given a special place among all subjects, not merely the realm of theology or RE studies, but pinnacle to all of them, apparently. He believes this to be a response to the repressive secularism, whilst ignoring all the evidence to the contrary and the continued existence of the liberal nations such as Sweden and Norway, which are incredibly secular in nature. None of this matters to Mr. Calhoun in his supposed upcoming post-secular society. If you wish to read more about his actions and the experience of Chris Moss, then the link will be down below. However, whilst talking about my own university experiences, Chris Moss suggested that I write a piece detailing said events. Naturally, the written format is not my preferred medium, and therefore here it is, in this video. My experience has not been as grim as Chris Moss's experience, possibly due to the fact that the University of Surrey is the workplace of none other than Jim Al-Khalili, the very president of the British Humanist Association. However, I have had a range of encounters that have sat with me through my 2 years at university. One of the earliest involved an event which my university's Christian Union held during the Fresher Week in my first year. Named Text a Toasty, the process of which you text the Christian Union a question about God or Jesus, as well as the contents of a toasty which have been listed on the flyers. They then run your toasty over to you and attempt to answer your question. Fact is that there were complications in me receiving my toasty, however those complications were the result of my own negligence, not theirs, yet thankfully a couple of my flatmates also sent in, and thus the apologists who arrived were all too willing to attempt to answer my question. This is when I first met an individual who I'd meet repeatedly over my experience. I'll refer to them by Mr. E. Whilst answering my flatmate's question on sin in the kitchen, I remember they stated that all sins were equal and, they were all the same, really. It was rather interesting then to see them backpedal and claim that we have to understand the reason or the context of the sin when I asked them whether lying was a sin, and then explained my Dutch heritage and their involvement in the Dutch resistance, which of course involves lying to the Nazis. It was quite funny to see then how they attempted to, well, you have to understand, etc. That's not so much a sin, but apparently genocide, which by the way the Bible never claims as a sin, apparently that's worse somehow. But sins are all equal. So it was rather funny to see this sort of excuse coming out. After having boiled Mr. E over that for a while, he then turned to my question and in response attempted to quote a supposed quote from Darwin about the mind of a man in comparison to a monkey. I responded then and there in its defense. It wasn't until later, after I transcribed my recording, having been holding my camera throughout, that I found out that yes, the start of the quote was legitimate, yet the latter part had been the words of an apologist doing an analysis of Darwin, accidentally edited into the quote when it was given the image of Darwin, because he had picked up his phone and tried finding it on the phone to then quote it to me in attempted argument. I published this video, contacted the Christian Union over it, and their president met up with me in person, thanked me and apologised. Not once did they or Mr. E ask for the published recording to be taken down. Move on a year and I've managed to set up the Atheist, Humanist and Secular Society with Captain Mikul. Then about half a year after that I get a message from Captain Mikul about my video. Turns out that he's been contacted by the Student Union over someone reporting my video. Again, Neither the president of the CU at the time, or Mr. E, who made it his goal then to convert me personally, asked for the video's removal. This then raised questions as to who was attempting to use the system to stifle critique, but I wouldn't be offered that information, of course, so I just shrugged it off and removed the video, as it wasn't my best anyway, so I didn't see it as worth fighting over and possibly getting expelled for it. I think I was a bit hyperactive when I recorded it in the first place. The fact is that I've got friends in and among the CU because I don't dichotomize into this us versus them mentality. Sure, if they wish to ask me a question, I'll answer honestly, but I don't go out of my way to create dislike. Yet even though I only ever go to events I've personally been invited to, my friends among me tell me that I've created a bad rep for myself as this aggressively disruptive troll, the angry atheist archetype. I mean, the only time I've been remotely aggressive, and that's pushing the boat out there, was recently at this year's Christian Union Q&A. They gave the Lewis's trilemma as an argument and then joked that they didn't know how an atheist would respond to that before looking over at the table consisting mostly of atheists and simply asking us. I noted that Lewis's trilemma was incredibly ableist in that a person with a form of psychopathology doesn't then suddenly become worthless as a person, and that a lack of perception on reality does not impact their ethics at all, which is what the Lewis's trilemma argues. That's one of the points they make, which is the idea that, if Jesus was personally deluded, then he could not have said anything great. That's incredibly ableist. This then gained their interest, and between sections where we all took a break, a couple of the panel would come over now and then and talk to us. Now, one of them attempted an argument from the fact that the Christian scripture somewhat survived whilst other local scriptures were destroyed, ignoring who rooted out and destroyed said opposing narratives. Another got bogged down into the problem of evil, where they hit the free will defense. Many of you know that I will first divide into synthetic evil and natural evil before using one of the several arguments I have depending on how the person responds. This time I utilize the ever-fun classic rapist versus raped, whose free will is being breached by who argument. I simply point out that the raped is having their free will breached through the act of rape. If they were giving consent and therefore choosing it, it would not be rape by definition. Therefore I note the fact that if God stepped in and violated the free will of the rapist, the free will of the raped would be preserved. Ergo, God, if all-knowing and powerful, is siding with the free will of the rapist over the raped. Their response was a little unexpected to this argument. They asked me to prove how rape hurts the victim. This made me hit critical, and I flipped out. Ultimately, they had to take the guy away as I continued to raise my voice about how on earth he could consider himself to be a moral being, as Captain Mikul attempted to calm me down. Now, this wasn't some random CU member. This was a person they had chosen to be on their Q&A panel for the society. A person who'd sought me out and then tried to convince me of God's existence. I expect a higher caliber of ability from such a person. What does a religion do to the otherwise good people to get them to question whether or not rape actually hurts someone in attempts to defend their God? Faith blinds them to all sense of humanity. It just seems to corrode everything human beyond a certain point of belief, including compassion. Now I have to deal with the fact that every time my partner sees Mr. E, he attempts to force her to read scripture after he found out she was dating me. They're really not that subtle. Then of course we have the campus dawa, typically events which involve external speakers coming in, and the Islamic Society attempts to lure students in with free pizza at the end of the talk. That's their style. It's not so direct as, say, the CU. This was how they tried to get people to attend their talk by Hamza Tortsius, the one that I went to. Hamza utilized two names, both social science researchers, and attempted to use them as evidence for belief in God being innate and therefore innate being properly basic. The fact is that one had publicly come out against what Hamza stated, clarifying that they had said no such thing, and the latter has to date never published the research Hamza claimed she has. I had previously noted this in interaction with Hamza, and then when I saw him lie about it to students again, I brought it up and quoted the individual directly. I was not aggressive, I was not angry. I was actually shaking a little bit because by that time I hadn't built my confidence to what it is today. In attempting to hold Hamza accountable, he suddenly took a dive and turned the discussion onto how people associate being atheist with being mean, arrogant, argumentative, etc. Rather than tackle the issue of him actively lying, he set out to portray himself as some sort of victim, which all he could really be was a victim of reality. I don't like the idea of someone lying about social science. It's my field of study. When someone utilizes it in a disingenuous fashion, it reflects poorly on the actual field, and wanting to stop that makes me an angry atheist. It doesn't matter who is telling a lie. When you are supposedly giving reasons to believe in something, and you have to warp what the researchers have said, then I will take issue regardless. You know, again, it all comes back to this idea, this dichotomized idea that any critique comes down to angry atheism. It's just sort of pushed out there, and it's sort of, you know, you get out of jail free clause. So yes, that's my experience of faith warriors on campus. One who reported me, even though they had no right to really. One who, you know, went out of their way to defend God by denying the harm caused by rape. And one who just simply lied, and then when I pointed out their lies, took a dive and attempted to make it out as if atheism was the problem, if being atheist was the issue, by being angry and intolerant of people lying. So yeah, that's my experiences. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is EOT here, and this part was not planned. You see, after editing, I realised I had forgotten one of my examples, one of my experiences, and it's pretty important. I feel it deserves to be here, so whilst my lovely Patreon supporters go past, I'll throw you on this little detail. So yes, this is of course the case of Peter S. Williams. Now, Peter S. Williams is a William Lane Craig wannabe. I know, those people actually exist apparently. Now, he came to our university on request by the CU, and I got personally invited by a member of the CU. So I went and I asked specifically whether or not I could record the Q&A of the talk. Specifically the Q&A. I pointed out my camera, etc. And he simply told me, well, you can if you want, but you know, I've got my own microphone, I'll be uploading the whole thing onto my website, etc. So I just thought, you know, no point. I'll just wait for him because he's got proper recording equipment, etc. Big mistake. Because when it eventually came out, and I was following him just so I could see when it came out, the lecture was there, but the Q&A was removed. I went back and I checked his previous talks, just thinking maybe actually he misheard me and maybe he doesn't upload the Q&A. Previous talks, Q&A is there. This one talk where I was there and I caused absolute hell, I pointed out his personal incredulity, I challenged his absolute bastardization of physics. It's gone. It's not there. Wasn't included. Apparently not important enough. When you actually get some discussion with a student, rather than plain arse-kissing, not worth the time. Only, and this is the thing, only after I started a series tearing apart his entire lecture out of spite did he decide that it was worthwhile uploading the Q&A. I don't know if he intended to appease me with this or something, but yes. So that was another example, and I hope that has been something of interest. Take care.